Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comrades, compañeros, welcome back to another episode. Exciting episode. I was going to say exciting, and then I stopped because I looked across at the guest, and I was like, it's really a crapshoot. Today, just doing me a favor because I didn't want him here. He doesn't want to be here. The great Mike Pesca from the GIST podcast. Oh, God, he was at Slate, NPR. What was were you at the Daily News, too?
I've read the Daily News.
You've read the
and
Daily
I've subscribed,
News.
yes.
They're trying to even stop you from doing that, actually.
Right. They've just kept making the Saturday edition smaller and smaller to punish me.
But you were a sports reporter.
Yeah,
You did all sorts of shit.
Yeah.
But now, not a lot. You don't do a lot now.
No, I just mainly am a pensioner, is how I think of it.
Happy Rosh Hashanah. Are you Jewish? Or
I'm half Jewish.
You're half Jewish, half Italian.
If dekel is served, I'll have it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's how good he is to us here at the Moynihan Report. On the high holidays, he comes to talk about what? Jimmy Kimmel? Did we talk about Jimmy Kimmel? We got to talk about Jimmy Kimmel.
I have a theory.
Because Jimmy Kimmel is back tonight, although the conservatives over at Sinclair Broadcasting, and what's the other one?
Nexstar, or is that from Succession?
I love pretending that I know who these things are.
It's like a Ma Bell spinoff, yeah.
Next, whatever it is, but they're all like, we don't want him. So he's back.
We're protecting our audience.
So explain, Mike Pesca, to the people that Disney has said, okay, we are not suspending him, but these local kind of broadcasters who carry the shows, some of them are objecting. So he's kind of back. Is that kind of right?
He is, especially since most people, although tonight there'll be a ratings record, but most people don't even watch the show via the actual broadcast. And Sinclair's a very conservative broadcaster.
Has been for a very long time, yeah.
Nexstar isn't, and that's interesting. They're just able to be jawboned or muscled by the FCC. They don't have a real political valence, but they had this deal before that was going to be before the FCC.
Correct.
So that's why they heard Brendan Carr's, I'm not even going to call it a dog whistle. I'm going to call it...
It wasn't a dog whistle. He's going to do this the easy way or the hard way.
Yeah, a Lucchese-esque threat. And by the way, did you see Ted Cruz attempting to do an Italian accent?
Oh, did he?
Yes, it was.
Do we have that?
I think
do
it
we
was
have it in our stack of
Bengali.
racist sots? Do we have Ted Cruz?
It was so bad. It was far from racist. As an Italian,
it wasn't.
I think you're insulting Oaxaca. I don't know what you're
like. So, as somebody named, for the people at home, you can tell from this that I'm half Italian.
Sure.
But from one Guinea to another, were you offended by Ted Cruz's Guinea accent?
No, I thought like he had only seen a version of Goodfellas that was copied a few times out of VHS.
Wow. Wait, was this on the floor? Wait.
No, I think it was on his podcast. And he has been great. He's been consistent.
He's been really good at this issue.
Best he's ever been. Do you think it's because he has a personal relationship with Jimmy Kimmel and played one-on-one basketball with him that one time?
I don't. I actually have a theory about this too, because if for those of you out there who aren't aware of this, so many on the right in Trump world were making these fallacious comparisons. Saying, what happened? What about Roseanne? What about all these other people got canceled for their play? It's like, the government wasn't involved. This is a pretty simple proposition. Nobody was turning the screws on ABC to get rid of Roseanne that was in the Biden administration or something. But what I think we're seeing here is because so many people in Trump world were lining up behind this insane push from Brendan Carr to penalize somebody they don't like politically, that it is kind of a battle of the old conservatives versus the Tucker types. Because Ted Cruz did that interview with Tucker that was so bloody, that was just a real battle.
Right.
And he has been going after him, and credit to Ted Cruz on this one. He's been like, anything about the Jews today from Tucker? Like he's just going on and on. And I think he's kind of going to be the one who's going to stand up for that wing of the party. Because if he's going to go forward, he always wants to run for president, right? He wants to be president. There's no way that man is going to become president in MAGA world. You might as well try to split that party and be the leader of the other faction.
Now, a couple things. One, the politics of humiliation are really interesting.
Yeah.
Because I thought Cruz got his ass handed to him by Tucker.
He did.
Not knowing within 10 million the population of Iran.
Yeah, but that's a stupid, I think it's a dumb thing. Yeah,
you got to get it within the ballpark, though.
Yeah,
I do think. Yeah. Just like the bombs themselves. But
do you think Trump has any idea what the population of Iran is?
No. Did you see Trump trying to pronounce acetaminophen, which isn't a hard one?
Did he? Is that a good one?
Wait, did he pronounce it?
Yeah, did he pronounce it?
I mean, he was led there by his nose.
Yeah.
Did you see him?
Yeah, it's hard for him because he always says paracetamol. He's British. His father was Scottish. So.
Right, and aluminium. Did you see him brag about his peace deal between Azerbaijan and he said Albania? Didn't say Azerbaijan right.
Yeah.
Got one name of the countries totally wrong. It was his peace deal.
And this was today at the UN General Assembly, in which he claimed to have solved cold fusion. He finished everything today. It was pretty impressive because the great thing about that,
little bighorn,
both
sides,
and you can cut away to the people from those countries, and they're like, we did so. This man, who is he? It's funny to watch that.
In the Times, they won't be laughing at Trump this year in the UN. I said, I think they might be.
No, they absolutely were laughing at him.
So to go back to Ted Cruz, Tucker also staked out that same free speech position, right? He did on his show articulate a fine enough policy on government interference. So that's good. But my theory is that Brendan Carr was almost a little like, cliche alert, dog who caught the car, because I don't think Donald Trump actually, how it all played out, was thrilled that Kimmel was canceled.
Yeah.
I think that in general, the conservatives said whatever they said, working themselves into a lather, that Kimmel said more than he did about MAGA trying to desperately claim that the shooter wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so they get very upset with this. Carr reads all this, issues that Lucchese Gambino-esque threat, and they take him off the air. Now, Trump is shrewd, right? And Trump knows that he loves to punish his enemies, but he doesn't get much out of a comedian being taken off the air. And it's just days and days of backlash. And backlash that mocks him for being really, really, really thin-skinned.
Yeah.
In a way that he loves to have the fight with the news networks. Yeah. He loves to have the fight with certain actors. Not in this case. I really do think he was thinking this isn't working for me. It's also one of the reasons why he doesn't pick fights with a much stronger adversary in South Park, right? Because he knows he looks dumb.
Yeah.
I always say when the king strikes out against the jester, it doesn't work well.
He would be unwise to do so. I want to look at a few things, a few screenshots that from news stories that I've seen in the past couple of days. And the reason that I want to call these up is mostly because remember what it is that Jimmy Kimmel is being dinged for. He's being dinged for saying, and you can parse this, and I even parsed it a second when I first said, well, he's not exactly saying, and then you listen to it again, you're like, oh, that's exactly what he's saying.
Right.
He's saying that, the MAGA types tried very, very hard over the weekend to suggest that he wasn't one of them, right? And this is something that I just saw over the weekend that I thought was fairly interesting, was the difficulty with which people have in mainstream media to say that the shooter is indeed one of them. I don't care about this stuff because I don't believe it's indicative of really anything. I think the thing that's most important is how political sides and institutions react to things.
Oh, so when you say
react to violence,
think it's indicative what the actual motivation?
The motivation. If you want to say, oh, this was somebody on the left, this was somebody who has a trans partner, it is ultimately meaningless, right? It is
almost always when they're part of a real dedicated cabal.
Correct. I am more interested in the people who defend this stuff and saying, the Luigi Mangione stuff and say, he's not a half bad guy. That's more disturbing to me because we're a nation of, 340 million people. There are going to be people who commit political acts of violence on all sides all the time.
And the reaction of the 300 million afterwards is really what matters.
I wanted to look up, can we throw up this, this is the NPR. This is just from this weekend. I saw, why did alleged assassin target Kirk? Evidence paints complicated picture. Complicated picture, okay, it's fine. And this is the bit that I thought was amazing. In fact, little is known about Robinson's politics. According to the charging document, his mother told investigators that he had become more pro-gay and trans rights oriented within the last year. Now, this is my commentary, couple that with the stuff on the bullets, et cetera, and included a text message allegedly written by Robinson that said, since Trump's gotten to office, my dad has become pretty diehard MAGA. But this is the bit that I thought was the most NPR thing. And you used to work at NPR, right?
Yes.
So you are responsible for this, much like whoever shares his politics responsible for the killing of Charlie Kirk. But Robinson is not registered with a political party in Utah. There is no evidence of his positions on other issues of importance to the left, such as immigration or labor. I read that and I was like, is this real?
Labor.
Labor?
Yeah.
Like, he's like, to commit this crime, I need to talk about the Wobblies. I mean, this is the wildest thing I've ever seen.
He engraved the bullets with Taft-Hartley forever.
But this kind of, in that piece goes on to strain itself over and over of saying, look, we really don't know. And they talk to an expert about, the sort of whatever, like catch fascist.
Yeah.
Whatever he says. Oh, is something in video game culture. Now,
pro-fascist.
I guess I don't know.
Culture?
The big tip-off is the person shot Charlie Kirk.
Yes,
okay,
and told his boyfriend, lover.
Yes,
he did it because he spreads hatred.
Correct.
Exactly towards people.
All
like
of that
you.
was released before this, and now I want to show.
It was right there in the charging indictment.
It was in the indictment. I want to show one other one because this is just a weird tendency. This is from a local news agency, WCVB, where I grew up in Boston. And there was a shooting that I heard about the shooting at a
CVB. Channel 5 Boston.
Channel 5 Boston. How do you know that?
That's a hobby of mine.
That's a real mental illness you have. But this is CVB in Boston. There was a shooting at a country club.
Yeah.
Right? And I saw this. And this is
Ione suspect.
So this is the first bit. Formella is the local prosecutor. Confirmed that the shooting was not hate-related, despite several alleged statements made by Nadeau, the shooter, during the shooting. It appears to us that those statements were intended to create chaos during the event, and that they don't give us much sense of his motive, Formella said. Now, you might be asking why I'm reading that first, because that was first in the news story. Down in the news story, it says, another wedding guest, Tom Bartleson, also said the shooter walked through the party and kitchen. He said children are safe and free Palestine as he shot people.
Yeah.
And this is not considered, it's not part of the motive. And there just seems to be, and there's multiple news stories like this about this event.
Yes.
Now, I don't know much about this event, but the fact that there's constantly media interference to say that the things that are right between your eyes, right there in front of you, are not what you think they are, and maybe there's some larger context, is only afforded to certain people at certain times. I imagine if the guy in that country club in New Hampshire was running through with a gun shouting white power or said that even once, we wouldn't have a similar response by the media.
That's exactly where my mind went. I wonder if there's any example of that happening. I would guess not. And the reason why NPR does that is I think they're operating within a bubble, but within a milieu where there's a lot of pressure, not even news pressure, right? They're not even saying to themselves, let's not get this wrong. There are many people who they socialize with or share news feeds with where they think that the shooter was a groyper. It's very important to prove that point.
The largest Substacker, is she the largest Substacker? Heather
Cox Richardson.
Who, by the way, I got one of her books this weekend. Whew. Not great.
It's dense.
No, it's not. It's a book about the history of the Republican Party, and it sounds it was written by somebody trying out for The Nation magazine and failing. It was very, very bad.
To be fair to her, she succeeded in landing in The Nation magazine.
And she succeeded in being the largest Substacker, so she's doing something right.
So that's a straight comment from someone who doesn't have an editor and is huge and should know better. The LA Times goes to Ann Donovan, who is a disgraced disinformation researcher. I added disgraced because that is just like what we're talking about, what the plain facts indicate. She was jettisoned from the Harvard Shorenstein Center because it turns out, and this was all documented in the Chronicle of Higher Education, which is not an ideological site. This was all documented that she made up all these charges and they didn't want her working there anymore because she was bringing disrepute to the institution. So she goes to Boston University, and what LA Times thinks the best thing to do is to get a disinformation expert. And by the way, there is a category that is almost never on the up and up.
Disinformation expert.
Yeah.
How does one become a disinformation expert?
How does one get disqualified from that job?
Yeah.
So they ask her, what did all of these writings mean? And in every case, it was it either means the opposite of the plain meaning of the writings or
video game
right
language.
And so what about a song, Ciao Bella? This is an anti-fascist song. It just is so plainly that. Yes, but a Groyper playlist on Spotify also includes the song. So if you want to have the theory that everything means the thing it means and the opposite, isn't that disinformation? Are you Are you an anti-disinformation expert? Maybe that is an accurate description. But it's in the LA Times. So maybe someone like Jimmy Kimmel reads it. Jamel Hill of The Atlantic tweets that out. Says the shooter was part of a MAGA gang. She takes down the tweet. But this is the sort of thing that's out there. Incredible publications that hasn't been discredited, or to the point where maybe NPR will pull back an eighth of an inch and say it's complicated.
No, I mean, it's within the bounds of we're not saying, my favorite one was the quote. It's perfectly, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a legitimate quote. It's a real quote, and what it is conveying is real, but it's meant to deceive people. When they say look, what we have heard is that he comes from a family of MAGA supporters. That's true.
Right.
It doesn't say anything about him. Right. But this was actually in multiple news stories that I read. And I say this stuff and I bring this stuff up not to just kind of, keep on, rehashing this stuff. But that is what Kimmel is accused of. Now, I am soft on Kimmel on this because, that's not a joke. He wasn't making a joke. I don't think he should have to apologize.
Right.
There's everybody on the right, he's got to apologize. Why?
He didn't insult Charlie Kirk's family.
No. And he's wrong. He was wrong, and he was trying to misinform people. Right. Do you think that that's something that we should be going on, much less the government, that the network should go along policing? Because if you think that's the case, the people who run Fox News and MSNBC and CNN are going to have a very, very tough job ahead of them when people are saying things that are misleading.
Yeah. And of course, in the context of he's a comedian setting up a punchline, this is a subordinate clause in service to the joke yet to come. He's not, I don't know, people could go to
I find the guy unbearable, but the entire purpose of what you do as a journalist and people who believe in free speech and believe in the government taking its hand off the lever is that, it doesn't matter how much I hate Jimmy Kimmel. It doesn't matter how unfunny I think
we don't have the First Amendment for the speech we love.
Correct. Yeah. It's for so he's coming back tonight apparently, and he's going to. And look, by the way, the only conspiracy theory that I've believed, and I want to just play a clip from Candace Owens. What is the context? Doesn't matter. It's so crazy. I just want to play it. But the only conspiracy theory is maybe Bob Iger, who's a very canny businessman, did this in order to prove a point about the government and then bring him back and get some ratings while he's at it too. I don't think it's much of a conspiracy theory. I think it's not a half bad idea, actually, to pull back and force this conversation that the fact that the head of the FCC is leaning on networks for having comedians make jokes or say things that, yes, they're not true, but you're not in the business of policing what is true and what is not true. I mean, what did the president say at the UN today? Anything that wasn't true?
Well, I know that yesterday he said there's a rumor that there's no autism in Cuba. So isn't that?
Oh, did he say that? I missed that.
Yes. There's a rumor because they don't take Tylenol. There's no autism there.
Oh, wow. They also don't have food. Maybe it's the lack of food in the communism.
Welcome, America or Cuba.
I want to show another bad headline. I was just collecting these. This is a CNN one about the acetaminophen thing. This is a great headline. Trump links autism to Tylenol despite evidence it's safe.
That's not the way to.
Now look at the subhead. The FDA says it's advising doctors on drug use during pregnancy, but the science is not settled. This is the same. The subhead and the headline are fighting with each other. There's no evidence, and then says the science is unsettled. And by the way, the science is not settled.
The imperative is to rebut Trump. Clearly, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I get the instinct, but I found this thing in Nature, the medical journal, the scientific journal, Nature.
Not just rocks and trees.
Yes, not just that.
Go out in the field.
They go not just in nature. Yeah, it's like I was walking around in nature, and,
possibly nude.
And it was like, look, it's just like from 2015 or something. It's like there's a lot of mixed data on this stuff. Just err on the side of caution and don't take acetaminophen, Tylenol when you're pregnant. That's what it wasn't Trump. It wasn't RFK. Right. And by the way, this is a great example of how RFK undermines his ability to communicate anything because of the crazy shit that he says.
Because no one anticipates or no one thinks about the second or third order effects. So the first order effect are mind, depending on what we think about this issue. Some of us are saying, yeah, you've said it. But most of us are saying, well, that's not right. You're giving out bad information, especially if CNN were to get its headline correct. But the second order effect is when the evidence becomes more solid and when that CNN headline is justified, who's going to believe it? You're just degrading on this specific issue. And then the third order effect is you're just taking away the credibility of the government or the organization itself. Sure. Now, people will argue it's already been done. So is this like a shooter-esque nihilistic cycle downward? Is that the play? That's the effect.
It's the effect. And look, we saw this during COVID when, because there were certain people making certain arguments, and in this case, it wasn't necessarily Trump, who was very bullish on vaccines then, and rightfully so, and decided to not be that way, despite he loved that victory.
Yeah.
Operation Warp Speed was, everyone gave him credit for it. It was like George W. Bush with AIDS in Africa. Everyone, bipartisan, gave him credit for it. And then he decided he didn't want to take credit for that because of so many people in his coalition.
And he also canceled the PEPFAR for AIDS.
Oh, yeah, the PEPFAR things. Yeah, well, that's a separate issue. Yeah, the Bush one, though. But as far as the other people in COVID world, look, I get that we didn't know a lot. I get we were feeling our way in the dark. But there was so much of this, taking people off of social media, et cetera, the things that we've all complained about before. But the headlines, if you go back and look at the headlines and how sure they were about these things, you don't have a cloth mask on, so you want to kill everybody in Southern Florida who's over 80.
Right.
You're on the beach with that. That is the same type of thing when you see that. That's a hangover from that type of headline writing that you see in CNN. There's no evidence of this, despite the evidence, and then the subhead says, well, the science is actually out on it. Right. It's like you're having these two headlines because one is a practiced instinct from the days of COVID in which we, pummel people for having the wrong ideas about health. There's nobody that is more skeptical than RFK than me. I mean, I'm beyond skeptical. And I think he's a loon on about a million issues. But on this one, I was like, okay, well, what's the evidence for it? And it seems like, well, there's some stuff that's suggestive.
Right.
And so I think he's overstating it, but
very much overstating it. I was interviewing for The Gist, Tom Frieden, who's was Obama's CDC director. And I played him, or I read to him a Jonah Goldberg critique of something he said. And this was during the time when he was one of the people saying, protest is fine because if the government loses the trust of its people, public health won't be possible. Yeah. And then Jonah Goldberg said, no, what erodes the trust of the people is people like you saying, go out and protest this cause you like, but don't be monstrous by going to church or opening a business.
Correct.
And Frieden had a good answer for that, which was, yes, but I always said and consistently said that doing any of those things outside was fine. So that cuts through all the nonsense. Yeah. I thought the whole controversy is why this, not that. If we had just been accurate and said being outside is fine, but we weren't allowed to say that.
Because it is, and I think that's exactly. But I think one of the things that was ruinous about COVID beyond the actual virus, obviously, is how much that destroyed trust in institutions. They were already, because I have had so many people say to me, particularly about when we started talking about tariffs, this is really bad for the economy. It's bad for the American people. Every economist agrees this is a tax on, why are you talking about experts?
Right.
What have we learned from experts? They don't know anything.
That's a disqualifier.
It's a disqualifier now it's this war on expertise, which was already happening before COVID. It was accelerated by it. But this kind of sucks, doesn't it, that we're in this point?
Another big thing is there's also a war on gatekeeping. And if the gatekeeping is done well, it's really quite effective.
Yes.
So anyone could count themselves as an expert. And when there was a list of 1,000 people either putting their name on, yes, go out and protest, even though we told you to adhere to lockdowns. And then when there was a list of over 1,000 people saying that Dr. Lena Wen, who's a really mild, and I'm not even going to praise her science, but she's just a really mild public health official who more or less said perfectly fine things. They protested her as being engage in a genocide because she wanted to end the lockdown slightly earlier than the most radical of them. And we say, well, these are public health experts. And you go through the list, and there are maybe students, maybe, a nurse somewhere, people who have some letters behind their names, but they're not MD. I think this was really erosive of the trust in experts. Yeah. That the fake experts and then the people using experts and misquoting experts, as they do with economists, in a really a way that degrades public trust. One other thing Frieden said was, the thing about the science, and when you have these appeals to the science, not how science works, there is no the science. Science is iterative, and it also knows that it will change. And I think journalism should act that way too. Correct. There is no the fact with journalism, or so often what we thought were the facts will change. Be a little humble, CNN, in your headline and express it.
I'm somebody who was, desperately wanting to punch the gatekeepers in the mouth and say, we don't need you. We'll order this ourselves. We don't need you to. I've changed my mind on that. It's one of the things that I've changed my mind on quite a bit in the past, say, 5 years, is because gatekeeping was bad for me at the beginning of my career. I had to get beyond these gatekeepers. And
many of us in big media and 3 networks.
Sure.
You can't succeed. Right.
Yeah. And it's everybody went to Columbia Journalism School. Everybody came from a family that had a parent or somebody who was a journalist. I didn't come from any of that. Right. I didn't go to journalism school, as you can tell from the accuracy of the things that I'm about to tell you. But I've also seen that you can't think of experts and gatekeepers as this undifferentiated mass. There's really bad ones, and there are really good ones. And what we have to do is use the really good ones against the really bad ones. And when you have people like Tucker Carlson saying, martyr made Daryl Cooper is America's best historian. Well, how does one become a historian? Do you put the PhD behind your name? No, you don't have to have that. I think that's nonsense. And there's been a lot of people that have had those things, the kind of Hugh Trevor Ropers of the world, that have been pretty crappy as historians periodically. But when you do no original research, when you cherry pick things for political purposes, when you've never been to an archive, when you do not speak the language of the subject you're talking about. Does he speak German? I don't think so. He's going into David Irving books and the rest of it. And all of these people come to the point. He is the biggest historian, quote unquote, on Substack, I think. He's enormous. He was offered to debate Andrew Roberts, a real historian who's written doorstop books about, number one, Winston Churchill. And his response on Twitter was like, no, I don't want to debate him. He's like a historian. And it's like, wait, what? No. So he's a gatekeeper type historian. You can use any words you want. You have to use gatekeeper. But that people know what they're talking about is why the people who don't know what they're talking about, I should say, is why we have this resurgence in Holocaust denial, in Holocaust minimization at the very best of it, is that this stuff, if you know this stuff, you understand not only the implausibility, but the utter impossibility that any of this stuff was fake, there blah, 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 there was no gas chambers here or there. I mean, if you know about this stuff, but these people don't know anything about this stuff.
Yeah.
It's all the same. I mean, actually, can I play a clip of this Candace Owens clip? And the reason I want to play this, because I just am fascinated by how this mind works. There's something wrong with this woman. I think this is pretty obvious to say. She has been going on rants about Charlie Kirk's assassination.
There was a massive pipeline
right, we're just going to play it.
That was almost exactly behind where Charlie was sitting. Here's that maybe it's a water pipeline. I don't know, but there it is under the flag. And to your right, I went into my tips line and I saw that somebody had messaged me about this. More than one person messaged me about this. They're like, hey, yeah, there's like a whole underground thing there. And to your right, you're observing those two little boxes. And they told me that was a trap door. Now, I'm not implying someone, popped up and shot Charlie, but that's a close-up of that area. I'm just implying that there's an entire underground there. And I remember when I looked at the footage, I felt like it was coming up. I don't know anything about ballistics. I'm not an expert.
Mm-hmm. True.
But if there was a hatch door nearby, then we can assume, as we should always assume with colleges, obviously stadiums, there's always an underground path. So I'm wondering if the federal government has explored the possibility that somebody could have been under Charlie and done that. While everyone's looking around and thinking that a shot went off from here, if that was just maybe like decoy number 2 and actually Charlie was shot from beneath him, which then could maybe explain why there was no exit wound. Again, I'm theorizing because I have a right to. I have a right to think. And that is interesting to me. Where does it go? Where do the tunnels underneath UVU lead to, right? That's an interesting question. Maybe everyone's looking up when we should be looking below.
Yeah, that's not an interesting question. It just, by the way, it reminds me of Waiting for Guffman. She's like, how many babies can you fit in the tire? If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch it. It's fantastic. But like, she's allowed to think, yet she is not doing any of that, it appears. That is one of the most deranged fucking things.
This is a great argument against giant lavender Stanley Cups, one. And I'm thinking when she's going about the pipeline, I'm like, Jack Prospiakic, the other guys who are going to take Charlie Kirk.
Well, by the way, the other people in that world are like, could you relax? That clip was pulled from that guy's Twitter feed who's in Malaysia, Ian Miles Chong. And he's like, dude, you're fucking insane.
Oh,
like,
he said
yeah.
Wow.
The gatekeeper. By the way, this is where we are, people. Ted Cruz is like, the government is getting involved in free speech and this is bad. The government shouldn't do this. Ted Cruz. Ian Miles Cheong. I don't know what his name is. Is that his name? That sounded racist. It wasn't meant to be. He's not American and he's never been here. That's all I know about him. True. He's like the Lars von Trier. He's never been to America, but he talks a lot about it. But even he was like, this is crazy. And everyone else is like, yeah, you can't speak at the funeral because you're a lunatic. Tucker Carlson can and talk about the bagel, what do you say, hummus eaters? I almost said bagel eaters, he didn't say that. The hummus eaters who killed Jesus. What does that remind you of? I mean, Mike, I'm sorry to ask you such a big question.
Is it going to be about
what the fuck is wrong with everybody?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Everyone's losing their goddamn minds. And go.
Because it gets ratings, because
I think she believes it, though.
Fractured and splintered. Well, you got to pretend you think it. When she's going about the people under the stairs, and I think Chris Elliott's going to pop up in an old
Fraggle Rock.
Chris,
the man from under the stairs who killed him. He's like, I don't know ballistics, by the way, but there's no exit wound, and which looked like it was coming from up. It's like, if you don't know about it, don't talk about it.
It is, except that this is her trade, and this is what she does, and what can she offer, and what can't she offer.
I mean, the answer to both questions is nothing. She can't offer nothing, and she can't she can't because she can't hold back. It's like, it seems to be every like little brainwave that she has goes out there, but I'm going to advise people.
But Candace Owens is brilliant. I heard Candace Owens is brilliant.
We disagree with some of our friends on these issues.
On the brilliance of Miss Owens?
We disagree on this issue.
In that lavender Stanley
I don't know, but I will say this to people out there in Moynihan Report land, which is a smaller land to Candace Owens land. It's kind of like the Liechtenstein to her Russia. Is
it a duchy?
It is. I mean, it's like the Andorra more than go out there to the tip line and just flood it with the dumbest fucking shit in the world and see if it gets on the air. Just be like, I don't know if you look closely, you see an angel flying in the background with a weapon, actually, loaded weapon. And by the way, maybe the police aren't looking at the underground tunnel. And she keeps on talking about valves, by the way. You got to look this up. She's talking about valves a lot. I don't know what that means. But because they have the gun and they match the ballistics really quickly.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Sort of like how they discounted the guy behind him giving signals about when to shoot.
Correct.
It's like, well, do we really need a guy telling him that?
You don't need the Roy Campanella of assassination.
Yeah, let's say we figured out the semaphore and cracked the code retroactively. Yeah. What would we have found out besides poor Charlie getting a bullet in the neck?
Kind of crazy. Well, let's talk about one more thing that is pretty interesting, and actually I think pretty important too, is speaking of Ian Miles, whatever his name is, and people in that universe of Twitter, Donald Trump has declared that Antifa is a terrorist organization. What do you make of that, Mike Pesca?
Well, a domestic terrorist organization, which is important because there's no such designation.
There's no such designation. That's
and I've talked to FBI officials and Frank Figliuzzi and guys who are MSNBC affiliates, and they say it would be helpful to have it, but since we don't, you can't designate.
You mean domestic terrorist as a designation, not Antifa?
Right.
Yes, as a
There's
category.
No law. There's no domestic terrorist law. You can break the laws of the United States, and there are terrorist acts, but there's no law per se. And from the analysis I've read, the reason that you can call a foreign entity a international terrorist organization is because they don't enjoy, going back to what we were talking about, the First Amendment.
Yeah.
So Americans have the right to free speech, have the right to free association, have the right to issue, short of terrorist threats, but absent the designation, engage in speech that the government wouldn't like. Yeah. So that's one problem. There's no such designation. Problem two is Antifa. It's not that there are no such thing. There are people who definitely believe that they're Antifa, and they wear black, and they break windows, and they cause chaos. The coordination between or among them, it's much less than even ISIS was in its system of cells. So it's not really a coherent ideology. It's a complaint. They're probably all anarchists, but those people don't all believe one thing.
But it's also, what does that even mean now? I was in Kenosha after the Jacob Blake police incident, shall we say. And
after an armed man was stopped from getting in his car. After an armed man was stopped,
a woman who was not to be allowed around, et cetera. And I was there the day that Biden came and Trump came, I think a day after. A big mistake of Biden to visit Blake's family, knowing the details that you knew at the time. Speaking of knowing people's motivations and knowing much more salient details.
I don't think it redounded on him at all. Like, I don't
no.
Even to this day, most people don't say. And he visited. Most people don't know that Jacob Blake was armed the whole time.
Yeah, and the original story, which went far and wide, was that he was breaking up a fight. I think I remember that he was breaking up a fight. But of course, that produces the Kyle Rittenhouse situation. It produces lots of rioting and burning, et cetera. And when that rioting and burning happened, the number of people there in Kenosha, who I was talking to, I was there as a journalist, who were saying, these are out-of-town people. And I talked to the cops, and they said, some of them are.
Yeah.
We've stopped some people that were, here, there, and everywhere. There's a sense that there's some sort of collusion amongst these groups. But that would be far more interesting if it was 1975 and it was the Weather Underground, because where collusion in that way was difficult. Posting something on, a Discord or posting something and says, hey, this is happening here, and you get in the car. What is that?
Right. So you're saying the Weather Underground, the collusion put them in the 0.0001% of people who were dangerous. The fact that they would collude.
Yeah.
Now it's almost harder not to collude. People, like-minded people who are totally benign will get on the same Discord servers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't like the designation of groups, terrorist groups, when it's domestic, which obviously there's no such thing. It's also it's a lot like Pam Bondi talking about hate speech. This is like we're inventing categories in real time because they sound good to us. It's like, no, we don't want hate speech. We don't want domestic terror. That can be abused in a whole bunch of ways. But much in the way that we talk about hate crimes, why do we need hate crimes, the sort of brainwave that happens in the commission of a crime, when we already have categories for these crimes? The same thing is true with Antifa.
Yeah.
If they're doing things that are bad, if they're burning down buildings, if they're threatening, intimidating people.
The actions,
they can be prosecuted.
The great liberal writer, Nat Hentoff, convinced me of this point 30 years ago. Why go into someone's mind? There's another point that goes back to exactly what we're talking about of the media discrediting itself. And do you remember when Antifa was first being talked about or blamed for things that they actually did and maybe some things they didn't? There was the trope among the mainstream media to laugh at and to mock the idea that there was an Antifa. And I can't remember how many reports I saw which did the cascade montage where they cut together all these people saying, Antifa, Antifa, Antifa. And then they'd come back to the host, maybe a Rachel Maddow or MSNBC type, and there'd be a look on the face. And the joke was Antifa is but a boogeyman. But it's not. And there's then the counter mobilization. So this is why if Antifa was treated correctly and taken seriously by the people not on the far left, but just elected Democrats, if they consistently said and the media echoed, they are a danger, then there wouldn't be the instance where the right then takes them up and takes their presence as a rallying cry. It's all just mobilization.
The people exist. What they call themselves is kind of irrelevant in a way, right? I mean, they're radical groups I remember I won't name anyone in particular, but I remember this being an issue of the opposite version of this, like Atomwaffen, these like 5, fat losers with shitty tattoos in their necks of like, Nazis and eagles and all this shit. It's always the master race when you see these people.
Yeah.
It's like this great Aryans but those guys are dangerous.
Yeah.
They're violent. They should be kept an eye on. But, do they name themselves? Are there other divisions of knuckle draggers in various states? I'm sure. Did they texted each other also? Yeah, I'm sure. But I just want people to keep an eye on them. I don't wait up at night saying we need to classify them as something as terrorists, which they are probably terrorists actually, and want to engage in terrorist activities.
It's also pointless and counterproductive in general to try to map a right-left salience on this. If it were the case that 98% of the violence was coming from, say, the far left, then that's something we could talk about.
Yeah.
But even, all the statistics that try to discredit the idea that most of the violence coming from the left, they will say 43% of the violence is coming from the left. And anyone who's actually in law enforcement will tell you, you have to follow the nodes of communication among these groups, but it doesn't matter. It is not helpful in terms of actually stopping it to say, 1, what's your ideology? 2, let's go from there and pursue the dangerous people. Do it the other way. Who's dangerous? Oh, that was their ideology? That could maybe give us leads. So it doesn't matter to say that most or the vast majority, especially when you're being inaccurate, is from one side or the other.
No, and I made notations the other day when I saw that story from New Hampshire. The guy, happened to yell "Free Palestine" at the end, and I say.
By the
this,
way, did it work?
Yes, apparently it's done.
If only they had taken
people in
it
Europe are
seriously.
now recognizing the state of Palestine.
If only CVP. Had put
I
that
mean,
message
it is. Yeah. Well, but this is the thing that. Why does that bother me? It bothers me for a number of reasons, but the number one reason is the special exception on certain issues. I made a list in the past couple of years. Crimes, violent crimes, a lot of which ended in death, the commission of which was accompanied by people yelling a phrase like that or something similar. And I came up with a lot.
Yeah.
A fair number. I mean, it's just like an astonishing number when you're like, good Lord, if there was something like a Dylan Roof or, that's actually probably over the top because his was just mass murder in the most hideous way. But if there were people doing, in the commission of sort of white nationalism or racism or something like this, and we lined up 10 in a row in which people had died, it reminds me of the comedian David Baddiel, the British comedian, who wrote a book called Jews Don't Count. It's a different thing with Jews. It's a slightly different thing. And on Rosh Hashanah, it might be worth pointing out that this is a bad instinct. It doesn't matter what you think about Benjamin Netanyahu's prosecution of the war in Gaza. It doesn't matter what you think about that. When you have people in the commission of violent crimes shouting out things about Jews and saying, well, it's just Zionists I'm concerned about, but actually taking people's lives. And we have a palette of these things. And there's a lot. People have died. Woman was burned to death in an attack in Colorado. Yeah. Guy was killed when he hit his head. I mean, look, what do we classify the attempt to burn down a Democratic governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro's house, for the motivation because he is Jewish? And this is an action on behalf of the Palestinians that I imagine the Palestinians don't want. Like you're burning down somebody's house in Pennsylvania, yeah, thanks. 2 people killed in Washington, D.C., leaving an event at the Israeli embassy or worked at the Israeli embassy. The list is longer than that, by the way. I found a number of other ones. The fact that somebody runs through killing two people, I think, in New Hampshire, yelling "Free Palestine," in that being dismissed in the first couple paragraphs, when we consider that in the past couple years, there's been a number of people in this country, not in Europe, and why it's different in Europe, obviously. It's not acceptable there either, but it's different in Europe because there's an enormous amount of refugees from the Middle East, from the region, and from the Palestinian territories, from Gaza in particular. Yeah.
So here's an interesting fact. And I was talking to Mark Oppenheimer, he does ARC magazine, and he pointed out to me that during the days of lynching and the days where Leo Frank was lynched for being Jewish, do you know who else was among Jews? None. That was the only instance of someone killed for their Judaism.
If you listen to Candace Owens, and I'm not even joking, she says that he was killed justifiably because he was a rapist.
He was a rapist and a Frankist.
And a Frankist,
So
yes.
the point is the United States has this stellar history, actually, of combating anti-Semitism.
Yes.
Comparatively and absolutely. And when that changes, as it does so starkly, and when the change is dismissed, and when the change is pushed down to a third or fifth paragraph that contradicts the headline, something nefarious is going on. If I could Candace Owens this, there's maybe something else going on in the trap.
Coming from underneath, from the valves.
I would bet that every single person, this is how it works, every single person who conspires to, or just consults, to write such a headline, or to downplay such things, or to not say they said free Palestine, or maybe an Allah Akbar here and there. They do it for a reason. I think it's mostly social pressure. I think they're trying to do the right thing. I think they're beholden to the idea that we have to protect the marginalized or vulnerable communities, but they're telling us what they define as the vulnerable communities. And it's not Jews. It's never Jews.
Yeah. No, they don't count. And it's always the canary in the coal mine. When you have a enormous explosion of anti-Semitic attacks, and I'm talking about attacks. I'm not talking about people, doing podcasts in which they say things that indulge in stereotypes about Jews in Hollywood or whatever. That stuff is with us forever, and it's never going anywhere. And there's also people who say things like that who don't have a deep amount of hatred in their heart. I mean, There was a link today on the Drudge Report about the rise of Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is out there saying, oh my God, Candace Owens is mentally ill. And they literally, sounds reasonable. And then, you remember when there's another clip of him in the same day saying, who's the biggest enemy of the United States, Muslims or Jews? And not being offended by that question. That was something.
It's like a poll question.
No,
for
it was
his
somebody
listeners.
on his podcast. He was in. Who do you think's the biggest threat? It's do you think that I'd have a guest on the show would last more than 2 seconds in that chair if they said, who's the biggest threat to America, Jews or Muslims? I would say you, probably.
Yeah.
People who think like you are probably number one on that list. But when he is positioning himself as the voice of reason in this kind of farrago of lunacy and nonsense and anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic attacks, and one of the biggest podcasts in the country, which is Candace Owens. She has one of the biggest shows. She is not only weaponizing this, she's monetizing it in a way that is so hideous to me that my response to this is keep it up. Keep it up. You have the right to do this and people have the right to listen to you, but more people should be paying attention that beyond the hilarious lunacy of her saying there's, the underground troll people that killed Charlie Kirk, is that in between that stuff is something so poisonous, so deeply poisonous, that it's the only time in my life that I remember serious debate about the facts surrounding the Holocaust, that these happen to be lining up at the exact same time. This is not a good time in American history.
Yeah.
Not a good time.
Yeah.
Do we have somebody out there in two-way land? Have we lost them to my insane ranting? We get Ray. Ray, how's it going, buddy? I'm sorry. I'm a little dyspeptic today, so I went along a little long. Sorry. How's it going, buddy?
How are you? It's fine. I just had a point about the DOJ.
Go ahead.
And there are two of them actually, and they both run parallel to each other. First, of course, the DOJ has already quietly released a report that said that there's no indication whatsoever that the alleged shooter in the Kirk murder had any political ideological. He's not ideologically centered. Boy, I wish I could speak today. That would help, wouldn't it? And the second thing is, they also did something that was fascinating. Just as the president, the vice president, and a bunch of others on the right were ranting and raving about how this is all the left's fault, they quietly took down a report that showed that since 1995, far-right violence was 4 times more likely to happen than far-left violence. And it's still on an archived link that you can find, but that kind of just got pushed to the side because it doesn't meet the narrative.
Yeah, I saw that, and a couple things about that. I think you're right. I mean, you're right. It doesn't meet the narrative, and I think that there's been people on the left that have been pushing particular narratives for a long time, and now the right is in power and pushing narratives. Even if there's some question about the methodology of that study. I actually didn't see it, but I saw some people questioning it. People I respect too, not people who are super ideological. You don't disappear it. That's an insane thing to do.
Well, they're Streisand affecting it.
Yeah, they're Streisand affecting it, of course. I didn't know about it, and now I'll go find it and read it. And on the ideological motive, I'd be interested to read that because I think that there's a couple things that you can say about it. I'm sure, because he's a young guy, that his ideology wasn't very robust.
Or formed. Even.
Or formed, yes, in the sense that, like, he is going to talk about Franz Fanon now, and he's, referencing, Wittgenstein or something. Like, no. I think as far as we can say, I think you're right to point that out, Rez, that ideology is probably the wrong word here, in the sense that his motivation, when he says he's engaged in too much hate.
Yeah.
And I have to silence that hate with, incidentally, an act of insane hatred, which is the nicest thing to say about it. But I think that as far as ideology, we could be cutting this in a definitional way pretty thin.
Yeah.
But I look, there might be a thing where he says, I'm opposed to high taxes. And I can't believe that he says these things about transgender people. It's not a contradiction necessarily, because we're trying to see that through the prism of how we view ideology.
And also most people, and this was an excellent phrase by a political scientist in 1964, most Americans are innocent of ideology. And he chose the words specifically because ideology is hard, and that's why I even said formed. You have to do some next level thinking. You have to do some abstract thinking to be coherent.
Is this a Richard Hofstadter thing, by the way?
I think it was. I'm trying to remember who it was. But innocent of ideology is where most Americans are, especially most young people. You have inclinations, you have impulses. You definitely have impulses when your prefrontal cortex is informed. And that's probably what's going on. I would also say about what Ray said, the absolute numbers of extremist violence are also important to look at because they're really, really small. In America, ideologically motivated violence is quite rare compared even to other countries in Europe. And a lot of the right-wing violence, not to discount this, it's actually, and the ADL puts out this report and they see an upswing or downswing. It's almost all prison biker gangs many years.
Yeah, like Aryan nation.
So this is considered right-wing. And then sometimes the Muslim violence or the Islamic extremism gets coded differently. Like Free Palestine seems left-wing, but what would it inherent of ISIS or something?
What is 9/11? I mean, there was one chart that was put out by a guy at the Cato Institute, and if you look at the fine print, and I like him a lot, Alex, and I like the guys at Cato, and it said, it excludes 9/11. It's like, well,
that's a big one.
Kind of a big exclusion.
Yeah.
Is it because it's hard to code that? Possibly. It is hard to code that. It's like, do we have a separate...
But that gets to the point that if we are very worried about ideological extremism, either being a factor in endangering us or fracturing the republic, it is so rare. This point is lost. I did for days after Kirk was shot, I said, what we really need to do is depolarize. And I kind of got my ass handed to me by my mostly left-leaning listeners who said, no, you need to point out what a bad guy Charlie Kirk was. I said, on many of these points, I'm not disagreeing with you. Although, if you want to call him a bad guy, get all your quotes right, please.
Yeah.
But that's not the most important thing now. And if you look at the charts of ideological extremism, even after Trump was shot, you remember all these experts like Robert Pape and these others who said we're in an era of ideological violence. It didn't come to pass. And along with those charts, you will see the extremism chart of violence in America, politically motivated by the right, going down, 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 down.
Yeah, I don't know what it is now. I mean, I've seen so many examples of it that I don't like. I don't know what it is like when you look at the entire thing in a sort of wide kind of relief map. Like, what is this when it compares to everything else? To your point about Europe, I mean, we had in the United States a radical, violent movement called the Weather Underground, which was responsible for almost killing itself, right?
Yeah.
Killed people in the townhouse bombing in the West Village here in New York City, possibly at the Park Station, San Francisco police. There was a bombing at Park Station in, I think, 70 or 71 that killed a couple of people. We think it was the Weather Underground. We don't know. Whereas in Europe, you had the Red Brigades, you had the Baader-Meinhof gang, the Red Army faction. In Japan, you had the Japanese Red Army. These people were killing lots and lots of people.
Right.
Carlos the Jackal. We never had that tradition
And
here.
that's the ideology.
Beyond, we had racist violence. We had terrorism in that sense, lynching, et cetera. But when lynching legislation in the sort of 1920s happens, the last documented lynching in America, I think, was 1981, and it was in Alabama. I think it was in 81, and it's great that we've gone that amount of time without something like this. Actually, no, I think James Byrd, I would say, was not a lynching,
dragging,
but he was dragging, and it was a racist.
Yeah, lynching
murder.
doesn't have to be.
Lynching doesn't have to be, but that kind of traditional one. But I will say, in a kind of moderately patriotic way, that we do a lot of stuff well when it is very interesting to young people who first read Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn, to think of all the things we do poorly.
Yes.
It is incredibly important to know those things in American history and to not turn away from them and sort of look them in the eye, but also to say that we have never had the political extremism / political violence problem that other countries have had.
And look, maybe we do things well at a high cost. And is the Pomerades doing things well?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe without them, maybe there'd be a lot more.
I mean, look, we know so much about the McCarthy period. We're obsessed with the McCarthy period. Who died in the McCarthy period? Who was put in prison for, a lifetime? Were there people wrongfully? Of course. You shouldn't have to answer any questions in front of any committee of of what your political ideas are. Full stop.
Right.
But were there mostly people went to jail for contempt, right? But they weren't going to jail because they were communists.
Right.
Right? I mean,
maybe Ethel Rosenberg was.
Well, I think she was involved. I don't think they should have been given the death penalty. But
what you're talking about, Baader-Meinhof and Red Army faction, that is the kind of ideology that is coherent. These shooters, they might espouse a notion, they might have picked something up, but they're not interconnected nodes where one arms the other. That's not what's going on.
Yeah.
And so we kind of map onto the American experience. Maybe we do this European, more pernicious, directed way of violence. That's not really what's happening.
But are we heading there?
In America, everyone's a lone wolf. And that's actually part of the American ethos.
I know, it is. I mean, you had the Oklahoma City bombing convicted one other person, a guy named Terry Nichols.
Yeah.
It wasn't a massive, and to what I thought Ray was going to say actually was this desperation, and they've learned something. The FBI and Kash Patel has learned something about the reaction to the Epstein stuff, is that you have to throw a little chum in the water for the conspiracy people, or you're going to have a hard time doing your job. When they say we're going to look at all the connections between everybody in these Discord groups that was essentially about video games, it's like...
They always are.
Yeah, you're always going to... I mean, he said no, we're following up. It's like, every investigation does that. They're always going to look into this stuff. But the desperate idea that there might be some bigger network at work here, that is, as far as we know right now, nonsense and going to come to naught. But the people want there to be. They want there. I mean, Candace Owens is a manifestation of every far right fever dream at the moment in trying to pack it all into a show every day, which is there's tunnels and there's Jews and there's Netanyahu and there's you guys are losing your fucking mind. So my fear is that we might get to a place where there's more of it. We have been not immune from it, but we've done okay as far as these things go.
Well, that's the big prediction.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you why it's not going to be true, except I could direct you to a year and a month ago when in July Trump is shot, and that was everyone's prediction again. And we seem to have forgotten it didn't come to pass. There was not more political violence, tit for tat violence injected.
We've seemed to almost forgotten that it happened. I mean, it just kind of...
And the trial of the second would-be shooter is going on now. Now, I'll say, undercutting my point, which isn't, don't worry, there's nothing to happen. I do think that the right had a direction at that point, and the direction wasn't violence and revenge. The direction was, let's organize to get Trump elected.
Yeah.
And so they could concentrate their minds and their efforts on that. And I think that the right has a different directive now. And it is something, or the far right or the Kash Patel right. Let's go and try to crack down against those who we call Antifa, and maybe everyone else who was ever seen wearing balaclava.
Well, I would say one final thing before we get out of here is that if there was, I think there would be hyperventilating if we saw a reasonably handsome person shoot down in the center of Manhattan, somebody, a Palestinian, a representative of Palestinian, an Edward Said type person. Edward Said's obviously dead, but somebody who is a symbol of that movement. And if we saw, as I did this morning on Instagram, a video from, I think, The Independent, the British newspaper, of, it was just, the only video was this. It was all of the young women filing into the Mangione trial this morning with signs. Well, they can't bring the signs in, but they were just all of these women.
Online, the first 40 people online.
It's like if you had...
love young women.
If you had somebody doing something that was coded as a kind of right-wing thing and creating this kind of...
Right.
I don't even know what to call it. I mean, the excuse making is one thing. Well, what these healthcare companies do is bad. It's like I refuse to have that conversation in the context of someone being assassinated in the center of my city.
Yeah.
Somebody who had 2 young children and was.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Crazy.
If there was a crowd outside the trial of the shooter of Melissa Hortman, and they were doing what the Luigi people were doing. It would be bad.
But I'd be disgusted then too.
I'd also want I'd want the FBI figuring out the names of all of them. I just thought of one thing. Luigi, the pipes. Do you think there's something going on there?
This is yeah. At the end of the day, he's going to hit his head on a flower pot, and something's going to come up, and we're all going to get lots of points. Well, you get a lot of points for watching this amazing show. We had a great show today because we had someone. I thought Pesca was going to be a real drag. I was like, this is going to be like the worst possible, like cop rock. Like it's going to be on for a day and then we're off after this.
Network Redux.
Yes. But he has a show that's smarter than this one. But you should listen to this one first, called The Gist. Go find it, subscribe to it. There's a Substack and everything, right? You
Sure.
can get all
the
that
Gist
stuff.
list every day.
Look at that.
Compendium of news items.
Exactly. He's writing. He's doing a lot more than I'm doing. So go over and subscribe to The Gist and watch all the old episodes. I've even on one talking about Sweden. What a good episode. Maybe we can run that here. But we didn't get to one thing I want to talk about. Maybe we'll do it next time, is the beginning of the Kamala Harris book tour. But we have thoughts for that for next time. But the next time will be, what's today? Tuesday? It'll be a Thursday. So Thursday, 7 o'clock, come back, go over to the Moynihan Report at YouTube and watch all that stuff. The Chiron will tell you everything. I think the lower third will come up and tell me to do all that stuff at the Moynihan Report. And, otherwise, we'll just see you on Thursday. Bye.